Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for another fabulous live session with PRPOI this Saturday. I'm your host, Tarunjit Ratan, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our 35th episode today. All of us at PRPOI are really grateful for the support and love all of you have shown us as we push the envelope and challenged ourselves to do better to help you upskill. This year, we intend to create more unique conversations in the PR domain and look at issues with a fresh perspective and new voices from across the globe. And keeping that in mind, today we have for you another fabulous discussion on how you can build and leverage a global network in PR. But you will ask me, why do you need to be a part of a global network? Isn't your work enough? Isn't the community in your country or your office gang enough? How does having an international network help you really move ahead in your career? Well, being a part of a global network catapults your career growth into a higher orbit. However, it is essential that you choose a network that aligns with your core beliefs and career stage. It's very important for you to do that. Our panel today will delve into global trends within the PR industry and how you can leverage global networks to evolve in your careers and find your niche. But before I introduce our panelists, a big shout out to our media partner, Advertising and Media Insider India, and industry partner, PR Boutiques International. Thank you for partnering with us. And of course, our excellent content curators, Sonali Sokal and Pooja Trehan. So let me introduce the panel. Keep in mind, all our panelists today have been in the industry for over 2 decades, accomplished in their own fields, a part of several advisory boards, and well awarded for their work. So let me introduce our first panelist, Lynnette Werning. She's the president of PRBI, and she joins us from Florida today. Thank you, Lynette, for taking out the time and joining us today. I know it's an ungodly hour for you out there, but thank you so much for doing this for us.
I'm delighted to be here, Taranjeet. I could never say no to you.
Thank you so much. So, a little bit more about Lynette. She's the founder. She's also the founder of Blue Water Communication and comes with over 2 decades of experience in the field of PR. At PRBI, she leads a team of 40-member agencies spread across 15 countries that work together as a team to address PR challenges on a global level. I first met Lynette in Boston over our PRBI annual meet a couple of years ago, and we instantly clicked and pretty much chatted up a storm discussing similarities, differences in how PR functions in each of our countries and different verticals. Over the last couple of years, I've come to respect her not just as a professional, but as a leader who has led the PRBI network into safe harbor through some really choppy weather last year. I'm really glad you could join us today, Lynette.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Our second panelist is Kavita Lakhani. She is the National President for Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, that is WICCI, PR and Digital Marketing Council. She joins us from Mumbai today. Welcome, Kavita. Welcome to the panel.
Pleasure to be on this chat, Tarun.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about you before I introduce our last panelist. Kavita is also the executive director of Lintas Live, and she's one of India's most respected comms professional with over 25 years in PR and digital marketing. My earliest memory of having met Kavita, which I'm sure she would have forgotten, was during my first year in PR when I was handling a press conference at Taj Mumbai. And I was a junior team member who was responsible for the media desk. And, so that was like my domain. I had to make sure that everything was okay. And I ran out of plain sheets within the first half an hour. And I was supposed to have ample amounts of it for journalists if they needed it. Needless to say, I was pretty terrified. I looked all around and found that there was a press conference that was happening next door. Without thinking that it's a competing agency and they might not help me, I simply ran over to ask for more paper. And it did not even occur to me that they might not help. Kavita just happened to be standing outside. She calmed me down. She handed me a bunch of paper to carry on with a huge smile. And she sent me on my way. And I'm sure she's forgotten all about it. But that moment of kindness kind of stayed with me forever. Right? And today, I'm delighted to have her here on a panel with us so that she can share more of that kindness to help all of us grow.
Thank you, Tarun. I'm so glad that we met long time back, and I'm glad that we reconnected as well. Yeah, happy to be connected with you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to introduce our last panelist, Bianca. Thank you so much for joining us. Bianca Ghose is the co-chair of Asia Pacific Association of Communication Directors, the India chapter, and she joins us from Bangalore. Welcome, Bianca.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
So I'm going to talk a little bit more about you before I get into the discussion. Bianca is a media, brand strategy, and marketing communications leader. She has a long-standing career in news, digital communication, creative storytelling, and marketing. She is also the chief storyteller and head of CEO communications for the global technology firm Wipro, and leads communications and messaging for Wipro's CEO. Also leads storytelling at an enterprise level. Yes, there is a fun example of how I met Bianca as well. I came across Bianca on one of the reputed online courses I took to upskill myself on digital marketing and PR. And out of all the people who spoke on PR, she was probably the only one who resonated with what was actually happening in the industry and knew how PR functioned. And you guessed right, if you thought that I got into a lot of debates with all the other lecturers, but hers was probably the only one that made sense to me and went without a hit, so much so that the online team actually called me to ask me if I'm all right and if I'd finished the module, because there were no frustrated comments or questions. Today, I'm delighted that she could join us on this panel to share some of that sane advice with us.
Well, that's very kind of you. Very, very kind. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
I remember reaching out to your LinkedIn immediately after your module to say that, listen, that was one of the best sessions that I attended.
Yep, I remember that. I remember that. Thank you so much.
So it's lovely to have all of you here, and I'm glad that, this is a complete panel made up of awesome women out here. Lovely to see all of you. So let's delve right into it. Before we start getting into the subject in itself, I want to understand from each one of you how you got into PR and what keeps you here. All of you have spent a good decade and I think a couple more, into the industry. So let's start with you, Lynette. Why did you get into PR and what keeps you here?
I arrived in PR in 1993 after working in broadcasting. So I studied communications and broadcasting in college and worked at a TV station for quite a few years in the production department as a director. And really determined fairly swiftly that was not my calling. And so I migrated to public relations because it matched my skill set as a broadcast trained person. So I was a good writer. I had strong communication skills. I did learn, particularly then in the early 90s, that there was a real need for people who understood how media works from the inside. And that really brought a great skill set to my career in PR. So I started out working in the arts in PR, and I've pretty much stayed really close to that. So I opened Blue Water Communications in 2006. So we're turning 15 this year. And we specialize in museums, architecture, and destinations. So we have museum clients in 12 states across the US. And it's been a wonderful niche for us and a really great career path. It's been 30 years and I'm still never bored on a single day. So I think I chose the right course.
Awesome. It's a really interesting niche that you also have in your own agency. I remember when we first spoke, it was completely mind-blowing and fascinating that there is an entire industry out there that caters only to museums, right? Kavita, would want to know from you, why you got into PR.
So I must tell you that, I come from a business family. I used to be the shyest girl in school, and this was more of a personal challenge. I wanted to get over that, and I said that, what's the best way to move forward in life? I just was enamored by everything that I was seeing in the advertising world. So I had this choice of going into advertising or any other discipline of communications, and that's when I came across this whole concept of storytelling, and it really, really fascinated me. It resonated with me as a customer first, as a customer, as a consumer of brands. And I think that's where I started my journey.
Awesome. Bianca, would want to know from you. You crossed over to communication from journalism, right? Not how has that experience been for you?
It's been good. Never a dull day. And I think my move was kind of similar to the reasons that Lynette talked about, right? That there's never a dull day. So in my journalism, first 11 years in the journalism space, pure play, stock markets and financial news, there was never a dull day. So my move to communications was not really because I was bored, but because I was in my comfort zone. And, early in those years, I would say that the Indian news media wasn't really investing in digital newsrooms. And I was already, by 2009, I was already doing primetime news anchoring, 4 hours of anchoring, market opening, market closing. And I'm like, what next? I'm too young to be in my comfort zone. And I couldn't see what next was, maybe as an editor, but that didn't excite me. And so when Weber Shandwick approached me with, a rather unique proposition to launch their branded content unit in India and Singapore, it seemed like a great, I would say, a merging of my skills as a journalist, storyteller, and somebody who understands how to communicate with people. And so I took that on, and ever since, I would say it was 2012. Since then, I've never had a dull day. Just constantly, I was able to, take risks, and it's paid off.
Awesome. I'm sure all of us can agree that public relations or communication, there is never a dull day on it. Every day is different and every day is exciting. So let's get to your individual networks. So to set context for all our audiences, could you help us understand, what a little more about your network and what is it that it is trying to do, or what is it that it is trying to change, in the industry? Kavita, would you want to go first?
Yeah, so let me tell you about WICCI. WICCI stands for Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and it is an institutionalized chamber of commerce. When I heard about WICCI and I read a little about it, I realized that, every other industry was represented in WICCI. Except for the communications industry, which is a very, very integral part of, I would say, the economy today. Each and every change that's happening, whether it's in the digital arena, or it's about corporate reputations, or about social responsibility, is communication led. And I just felt very strongly about the fact that here was an industry which is growing in double digits every year, and it's not represented on a chamber of commerce, on the Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And I said, this has to change. Also, I felt very strongly about the fact that, women in the communications industry, and when I talk about communications, it's not only about public relations, it goes far beyond that. Whether it's journalism, advertising, media buying, planning, or it's content creation. One commonality that I'm seeing is that, the entry level has a lot of women in there. But as they rise in their careers, they drop off. And I think that was one thing we wanted to address. So that was really my motivation to create the Public Relations and Digital Marketing Council within WICCI. That was the first thing that we did. And also, more importantly, from a personal perspective, I really was keen to give back. So that's why.
Awesome, and I think we there is a lot of work to be done there, and I'm sure with so many intelligent and awesome ladies together at the WICCI Council, there is a lot of change that you guys can bring together. Lynette, moving to you, apart from letting us know a little bit more about the network, can you also throw some light on why you decided to choose this particular network?
Sure. So PR Boutiques International is a network of 40 member agencies in 15 countries, and we now have members on 5 continents. So the focus of PRBI is really to engage with other members, and boutique agencies as a rule generally means you have possibly less than 20 employees, and very many of our members, including my own agency, has a very specific area of expertise. So we have agencies that specialize in law and the arts and all sorts of different, very specific niches. So I think boutique agencies are an interesting antidote to clients who have felt lost in a large firm. So that's really the commonality across the globe, is that working with a boutique PR firm, you generally interact with people who are the owners of the agency, who have a lot of experience. And so you really get that high level strategy and help with your public relations crises and issues and opportunities. So I joined PRBI back in 2014, and I was invited by a PRBI member. She was having a crisis. She was working on a project, and her team of staff, they were doing an event. They got hung up at the Canadian border and they couldn't get into the US. And so at the time I lived in Ohio, right below the Canadian border. And she literally Googled PR firms and found Blue Water. And so we jumped into a project that we knew nothing about. And afterwards, when we sort of connected and got to meet, she said, you should really think about joining our network. I think you would be a great addition to the team. So I did. And it transformed my firm. I think for my agency, it is the single thing that I did that changed the trajectory of Blue Water. If I had to pinpoint the day that everything changed for us, it was that day. And I had always been involved in networks. From early in my career, I was involved in PRSA, which is the Public Relations Society of America. I was the chapter president twice. I was the national delegate a couple of times. So I've always been involved in networks, but I feel like as my career has grown, my network has grown. So early in my career, I was in a chapter that was just maybe within 50 miles of where I lived, and that was enough. But then as my career kept growing, my network kept growing. And now we have this global opportunity to really solve problems and support each other.
Absolutely. And I completely concur that, joining a network with different brilliant minds from different countries has just changed the trajectory of, I think, many an agency in the network. Bianca, coming over to you, your network is very unique. In fact, when I came across it for the first time, I was intrigued to know that there is such a network that exists that is so focused on the in-house communicator, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about it and how are you planning to change the status quo of the industry?
It's a huge task, to be honest. But let me tell you a little bit about APACD, which stands for Asia Pacific Association of Communications Directors. And, it's essentially a peer group that, connects communications directors across the entire region. So we have chapters in Hong Kong, Australia, Singapore, India, and we're now considering, even though it's not part of the APAC region, so as to say, but also possibly Dubai, because there's a lot of interest from there. Communicators, which also gives us a sense that perhaps communicators in that region, they feel a little bit left out and they feel that they will benefit from being part of a network. But I'll come back to that in a bit. I think this network has existed since 2014. And, there have been more than 400 senior, I would say mid to senior and senior level communicators that have been members of this group for, all these years. And then early on in 2020, just around the time the pandemic hit, we sort of revamped the approach to market and what we stand for and what we want to do, because there's just so much to do, right? You can't be everywhere doing everything. So we kind of streamlined that and relaunched in a new avatar, so as to say. This was around March. And then I happened to be, that's just who I am. I make friends, I speak to people a lot, I have lots of connections. And so, the gentleman who sort of holds this entire piece together, and some of you may know of him, Arun Sudhaman of Provoke Media. We were chatting, and one day, and we have long discussions about the state of the industry, how it's evolving, what was the impact on the communications industry throughout the pandemic, and how the position of the communications PR industry has sort of been elevated because we've now played a critical role in not just branding and communication, but also in business resilience. So what does that mean for the industry, and how can we sort of help elevate that going forward? We were having a long discussion, and he said, why don't you come and join us? And why don't we see what we can do and maybe bring the APACD community to India? And so Arpana Arpana heads communications and strategic relationships and CSR for Shell in India. So, we got together and we said, we're going to launch this in India. So it's now been about 2.5 months, and we've been thinking through the charter because, see, India is a very unique market. It's a very dynamic market, very large. There are possibly thousands of PR and communications professionals, and I'm not even including marketing in this market. And so the needs are varied. So we're right now speaking to our peers to understand what are your teams thinking about? Where is the challenge? How can we help them? And in doing so, is there a way that maybe we can establish some common standards in the industry? And so that's kind of the place that we're at, and we're definitely looking at onboarding many more members. There's going to be peer-to-peer networking. There's definitely going to be some form of mentoring that we're thinking about, particularly to the point that Kavita made about not having enough mentors in India. Yes, we would all want to, but then we all have our day jobs in a way, right? So being able to do that, having the conviction to do it and continue doing that requires some sort of a community that holds you together. And that's what the APACD is essentially trying to do.
Wonderful. With all of this happening, I do see in the next couple of years, or maybe, the next decade or so, there'll be a huge army of very motivated, very future forward thinking professionals out there in the industry, whether it's external communication or internal communication. Yeah, there's a very interesting question from one of our audiences. He asks, life in PR, our communication is already very full. If I do take time out for a network, how will it benefit my career? So this brings me to one of the very essential questions of our panel today. How does we'll kind of start with, how does one begin to select a particular network to join? Are there any thumb rules that one must consider to be able to identify and say, this is what I would like to add my energies to? Kavita, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I have a very simple thing to say. One is in response to that question that you received. We are so busy as PR professionals. How do we kind of fit in one more thing? I truly believe that if you want to go towards a certain destination, and I think that's for you to decide. You need to take out the time for what you need to do to reach that destination. So if you have a goal in mind, in fact, first have a goal in mind, and if you want to kind of go that way, you have to take the time out for it, and saying that we don't have the time is truly, it's something that you need to kind of prioritize for yourself. So I would suggest that, take the time out for it and go for it. And how would you choose the network that works best for you? I think you have to really study what is the goal of each network, what are the initiatives that each network is kind of proposing to roll out, and how do they resonate with you. I think that's very critical. Once you define that, once you understand that, you'll be able to make a choice very, very quickly. It won't be difficult at all.
Absolutely. Lynette, any thumb rules that one must keep in mind to be a network?
I think there's really two parts to that question. One is, how do you find the time? And two is, how do you find the right network? And the how do you find the time, I can only answer for myself, but I really have a structure that a quarter of my time is dedicated to business development. And for me, that bucket can mean new business, it can mean networking, it can be marketing blue water. But my work with PRBI and the other networks that I belong to falls into that bucket. So it is, to myself, part of my job. It is part of the job task that I have assigned to myself. And so once you put it at that level of priority, it means that you make the time for it. And the other thing is that it has so concretely impacted my bottom line, and that I never question the value of doing it, because I have learned new things or had an idea sparked or received advice from other PRBI members that have made my business more profitable, have led me to new business opportunities, or just simply made me better at my job. So I never really questioned the value of investment of actual money and my time.
Absolutely. But I do believe it requires a certain amount of conviction to be able to dedicate that amount of time to a network. And for a lot of people, I've always seen that, they would want to see the end result first. What is in it for me? What will I get if I join this network? If I, spend X amount of time, what is the ROI? I'm sure we are all very tuned into the ROI conversation, right? What is the ROI that I get out of it? And that becomes a difficult challenge, a difficult challenge to kind of address, because you continuously keep pushing them and telling them you have to invest time first. And I think that's one of the challenges that everybody needs to overcome to be able to see, the overall benefit of joining a network. Bianca, I want to address the next question to you. You could have joined any external or internal communication networks, right? There are so many of them, right? Why did you choose to decide? Why did you choose to focus on this particular one? And what would be your advice in terms of thumb rules for selecting a network?
Sure. Yes. I think I would just add on to the points that Kavita and Lynette have made, because they're all absolutely valid, and they go for me as well. But I do want to go back to one point that you made, Tarun, which was about, you start by thinking, what is in it for me? And I think after a certain point in time, at least at this stage in my career, now it is less about what is in it for me and more about, is there something I can give back to the community? I mean, 19 years in, I've made enough friends in the industry. I pretty much, I know I can pick up the phone and speak to anybody. But beyond just learning and helping that help business, is there something more that I can do for people who are starting out in the industry? Because, as you know, there isn't a structured way to learn the tropes of this industry. Perhaps, you talked about that course that you did, right? Which also goes back to the time point, that I'm already doing so much. Should I or can I take out time to do, up level and upskill myself? But I think after a point of time, it's also about what can I give back, and not just about what am I getting out of this, which is very simple, because I personally think inspiration is everywhere. And this is a very dynamic industry. It's hard to stay relevant all the time. It is therefore important for us to connect with people, see what they're doing, learn from them, be humble, and say that, hey, I loved what I saw. You did, this campaign with something that looked really challenging. Talk to me a little bit about that. And when you're open, people open up, and they sort of help out as well. You build relationships, right? We're not in the business of doing business with businesses, but we actually do business with people. And so if that connection is there, then I guess it really helps. There's only so much you can do at an individual level, right? Reaching out to people. Sometimes people don't respond. Not everybody on this planet is very kind, right? Or they take out time to, just talk to you. And especially when you're starting out in your career, it's difficult. So that is why I think the need for a network like the ones that we represent here is very critical, because you then have people who've already been there in the industry to guide you. Second, you learn so much from them. Third, for me, what was very important, and the reason I chose APACD, was reach outside of India. So for me, my entire community and network is inside India, maybe a little bit in the US, because in my work, I primarily work in that geo, because from a Wipro standpoint. But the APAC market is so dynamic, so thriving, and I do not have a way to tap into that market to learn, to network, to just be seen in that market, right? So for me, being able to get a foothold into the entire Hong Kong, Singapore, which is a thriving market, was kind of the driving force for selecting APACD over the various options that we have.
Interesting. There's an interesting point that you made. After completing a certain number of years in your career, you decided that was a good time for you to give back. There's an interesting question that has come up from our viewers. What is the right time in your career to be able to join a international network or any kind of network for that matter, right? What would be the right time that you would recommend that somebody join a network? The question is for everyone.
I can jump in on that. I would say immediately. There are student chapters of many organizations. PRSA, Public Relations Society of America, has active student chapters, and I would leap in at the student level if you can. I've been to enough chapter luncheons where there's students there, and you can tell, like, I'm going to be hearing about this person for the rest of my career because they're, a sophomore in college, but they're already networking with people who have 10, 20 years in their craft. So I really would say as soon as you possibly can, and then carry them through your career. Those network connections that I had from my 20s, I still have, and have been mentored by some of these people through my whole career.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. So my only addition to that would be is, besides immediately, perhaps 2020 has given us that reason, if we needed another reason, to be part of a community, because we're no longer meeting people. We're no longer going and attending conferences or, just showing up at summits, etc., which is a great place to meet people. So I think, the value of a network is especially more at a point in time when we're still living with this virus, maybe another 8 to 10 months before, mere mortals like us get access to the vaccine and, we're able to go back to life as it was before. So absolutely, fully agree with Lynette's point there. And now is as good as ever.
Yeah, I have a view on this, which is, what do networks give you actually? Think about that. So very simply, I think, and this goes across networks, whether it's APACD or whether it's PRPOI or whether it's WICCI. Definitely one of the most important things is networking. And I think I can't stress enough, I can't emphasize enough on the importance of networking for your career, And truly, like Bianca said, earlier on in the discussion, if you want to play on a global level, you want to learn best practices at a global level, you want to really interact with people at a global level, you've got to be in some network which allows you that access. So networking, most important, and the easiest way of networking is really going through a network, whichever network you choose. The other thing that most networks are really emphasizing, including WICCI, is mentoring. The fastest way to kind of rise in your career, and painlessly, if I may say so, is through the mentoring route. If you have a mentee, if you have a mentor, that person is very well experienced. He or she has had the exposure, over many decades, and can actually, make your rise to the top fast. He can speeden up the process completely, and I think that makes a lot of immense sense. Why should you kind of try and figure out things on your own if you can take some help? So lean in. The other thing that I think we talked about is the importance of upskilling. If you want to be relevant in today's times, you want to kind of adapt to what's happening around you, you need to upskill all the time. And I can't stress enough, I can't say this in any way, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. It's very, very important that you start on that journey earlier on in life. And as Lynette said, I agree with her. The soonest that you start, you're not losing anything. You're only gaining as you go forward. And I would say the last bit, every network actually stresses, emphasizes on that. Collaboration is today the it's absolutely important. So that's something that you learn being part of a network. You can't be a solo player. You want to be, if you have aspirations at a global level, go for a network which resonates with you. And I think you're going to only come out richer out of the experience. You're not going to lose anything for sure. Yeah.
It's a little bit like, right? I mean, I remember back in my 20s, I used to ask, is now a good time to get a life insurance? Am I too young for it? You're never too young for it, right? Because things can happen anytime. Similarly, with a network, with your own community, with learning, there's never, it's never too late, but definitely it's never too early.
I'd just like to add one more thing, to this point. I think one more thing that networks do for you, really is to open your mind to opportunities. You can continue in your career and, kind of look around and figure it out on your own. But I think the smarter way to go about it is to actually, look at that world around you, learn or actually absorb the experiences of many, many different professionals, around you. And each of them has a story, So get inspired by them, introspect what you like to do, and then go forward. And your network will, whichever network you join, will help you get there. And I think that's wonderful. It's the beauty of networks, I would say.
Absolutely. I was just about to comment that I remember when we started out in our careers, some 20 years back, there were not a lot of networks that supported, young, fresh graduates who are just joining the industry. And today, I think all the people who are entering the industry and are in the industry, it's a wonderful time to be in the industry, because there are just so many more positive networks out there who are willing to support you and mentor you. I think it's wonderful. It's a wonderful time to be in the industry right now. Yeah. So we have a specific question, Kavita, for you. Can you please share any specific examples of how you're supporting campaigns in markets other than yours?
So I work. I'm going to take this question from the perspective of my role at Lintas Live, which is a creative first digital PR agency. We have a global network, and I think we believe that it's critical in today's times, because your consumers are not really confined to a geography. In fact, like I always say, geography is history. It doesn't exist any longer. We are exposed to what's happening in the global market. So by default, any campaign that we think of has to have a local nuance, but it has to have scalability at a global level. So when we think of campaigns, we are trying to marry what the local customer wants, but is that idea scalable at a global level? So for example, for a brand like, I would say, one of the detergent brands that we had, there was a campaign which was very simple: is dirt good? Daag achhe hain. So that was a campaign that was done by Lintas, and completely an integrated campaign. Or there were campaigns which were done for Lifebuoy, which is a global hand washing campaign. These are concepts or ideas that are globally relevant. How you interpret them at your local level is completely to the local teams on the ground. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm going to tweak the question for the other two panelists a little bit. How have you used your network, right, to be able to support a campaign that is beyond your current country of residence? Have there been any examples where you've taken the support of the network that you're a part of to be able to support something? Lynette, do you want to address that?
I'm trying to think. I know that our parent company worked with you when they were doing a trade show in India. So I know there's been quite a few opportunities there. For Blue Water, I think my greatest tapping into our members in other places is when we're doing an exhibition for one of our museums and the artwork is coming from their country. So, or we've somehow made a connection. So we're doing an exhibition of artwork related to the monuments men coming up. So World War II era, the artworks, a lot of it's coming from Berlin. So I know I'll be talking to our member agencies in Germany. I've talked to our member agencies in Italy when we've been working on projects involving Italian art. So because the art market is very global, it's very convenient for me to be able to tap into our membership just to make sure I'm understanding everything that I should understand and be able to ask them questions.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. I know there is a lot of, shares that happen within the PRBI network, just to be able to support each other. And it's a brilliant think tank, which can actually help you get more ideas from different parts of the country. The perfect moment when a particular client will tell you, I want unique ideas that have never been done before. Yet I need examples of you to, for you to show me that how has it performed, right? So that's the perfect time that I know I have reached out to the network to be able to ask for suggestions and recommendations. Bianca, what about you? I mean, have there been any incidences where you've taken the support of a network, might not be this particular one, to be able to, support a campaign?
Well, I moved on from the agency side to the in-house brand side almost 5.5 years ago. So it's harder to sort of think of examples. But I remember, 2018, when I was essentially starting out on a new campaign, which had to do with inclusion and featuring women in technology, because that's a key area of focus for Wipro. And at that point, one of the key, I would say, input areas for how I should structure that program, what would make an impact, essentially came from my network. It wasn't, I don't think I can give an example of what network, but it was essentially people that I know, people who I respect, people who have a voice on this subject. CIOs of companies who are passionate women in tech champions reached out to them, and I said, look, I don't have an idea. I want to do something. What do you think? What are you guys doing? Give me a sense of, what a Dell is doing, or a Kellogg's is doing, or a Nestle is doing, or an Estee Lauder is doing. And surprisingly, each of them took time out to say, here are the 5 things we're doing. These are our lessons and learnings. And, not everything works, but diversity is not a race to the top. So we can all benefit from each other's lessons and learnings. And people shared openly. It's now been a year, almost 2 years, that I run a fairly successful program at Wipro called Women in Business, which has a video series, which has inspiration events, which is now moving into a DEI ideas exchange program. So we're doing various things under it, and a lot of it really those ideas are inspired by what we've seen around and what works and what doesn't work. So yeah.
Absolutely. I'm sure that will be a wonderful one for a lot of women who are in the network to look forward to. When you mention challenges, it brings me to my next question, right? Is there any specific challenge that, the network that you joined helped you kind of overcome? The question is for all the panelists. Kavita, you want to go first on that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. The WICCI India chapter has just started out. Having said that, I think so far the only challenge that we faced, and I think we are going to overcome it, is the fact that there's a lot of chatter around the fact that why is something like that required? Because there are enough women in communications, and we've been hearing that. And I think the simple answer to that is that there are enough women in communications at the entry level. Certainly, in fact, double digits, 38% of the staff at the entry level is women. However, what happens is that as they rise to the top, to the mid management level, it goes down to 11%, and when they reach the boardrooms, it's barely
Yeah.
3%. And I think
Correct.
that's something that we are trying to address. And I think we're going to need the support of both men and women to actually enable or make this happen, in terms of changing that 3% to maybe, double digits soon. So I'm sure that this challenge is going to get overcome soon.
Absolutely. And we're all looking forward to it. Lynette?
I was thinking when you asked the question, when I went to my first PRBI conference, it was in Portland, Oregon, in 2014. And at that time, Blue Water's client mix was half in our area of expertise and half what I would call other, whatever just came in and I would do the work. And so I laid out a presentation about my company and I shared my financials. And two of the gentlemen that are members said, yeah, you need to get rid of all of this other stuff and just focus on what makes your face light up. Because you talk about your museums and your architecture and you're all excited and animated. And then you talk about these other clients and you kind of fall apart. And I said, but I would have to fire like my second largest client and 5 other ones. And I thought about it when I came back and I did it. And I said, we're going all in. We're going to be just museums, architecture, destinations. We let the other clients go, which is excruciatingly difficult to do. And what I will tell you is from that moment, the business has grown threefold. That when you can go to a client and say, this is what we do, the people who work here, this is our expertise, it made the difference. Here, I think if you are going to be a small agency, to be an agency of specific expertise is the way to go. If you try to be a generalist firm and you have less than 20 employees, it's hard to have a level of expertise that makes you the best. And we were able to tap that. And it's only because I went to that conference, and it's only because I listened to what the people said, which was difficult to hear.
Absolutely. Sometimes an outside perspective helps, though I can't imagine how you found the courage to fire your second biggest client. I mean, that must have been like really, really tough.
It was not fun. But one other real quick note on networks. When I did decide to open my own firm 15 years ago, one of the things I did because of the network I belonged to then was ask 5 agency owners to go to breakfast individually and ask them what the bear traps were that I shouldn't step in as I started a business. Because I knew PR, but I didn't know anything about running a business. And they were very frank and honest. And without those breakfasts, and I only got them to say yes because I knew them from having gone to meetings with them, I wouldn't have known the things that I could have done wrong. And it saved me from making a lot of mistakes.
Wow. And I'm sure, I mean, those are the 5 people that, everybody in Blue Water would be thankful for, because I'm sure it cut down a lot of, unnecessary traps that you would have fallen into.
Or even focus, right? I guess, when you focus your energies on what you want to do, then you're just opening yourself up to the possibility of, greater success. So it was very bold, Lynette. Congratulations on being able to take such a bold decision. It's risky.
Bianca, coming to you, any examples that you would like to share with us?
So I'll change your initial question to us slightly. You said, what challenge did a community or a network help you resolve? I would switch that to say less of a challenge in my case, rather a desire, which was to broaden my network in the Asia Pacific region. So that was my primary reason for choosing APACD. And the secondary reason being I have a fair amount of experience that I'm happy to share with others. So is there a way for me to help, bring some of that to the industry? So that was my secondary reason. But I would encourage us to think of one thing, and giving the example of my own career, not so much a particular community, but the LinkedIn community, for example. My last two jobs were essentially from LinkedIn. And how that happened is because, I go outside of my comfort zone, and beyond my day job, I end up doing a lot of work. I'm on the advisory board for a not-for-profit for almost 4 years now. I do a lot of, one-on-one mentoring with young women. And so I've been, speaking about industry issues, etc. So the then CMO of Wipro, he found me somewhere on LinkedIn doing something, and he reached out and said, you know what, I just want to have a conversation. And so for me, if a CMO is reaching out, I said, okay, sure, I'm not looking to move, but you're a CMO, I'll give you the respect, we'll talk. And so that conversation went on for 8 months, and then I had an offer that I could not say no to, a chief storyteller for an Indian legacy company, which has a different mindset, but is willing to take a risk on you. You don't say no to that. So I would say that was essentially the power of the network. Similarly, the job before that was also that. I remember with Weber Shandwick, we pitched with a certain company, and it's not easy to find out because I got hired by the company later on. I pitched with a certain company, and then just generally reached out to the guy we pitched to and said, hey, it was great to meet you. Pity we don't get a chance to work with you, but I'd love to stay in touch. We did stay in touch. And a few months later, he said, you know what, I'd love you to come and work for me. And that's how my other job happened. So I guess it is the power of the network. So irrespective of, whether or not, you're looking to expand your network, et cetera, it's really just about, it could also help your career significantly. So think about the power of the network, the exponential power of the network, with all the things that Kavita and Lynette have said, and my example of how my career really sort of took off because of the networks I was building.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful story. And I do believe, it doesn't have to be a particular network. You can create or cultivate multiple networks at the same time, and it can be an entity. Both work. So there's an interesting question from one of our audiences, which I'd like to pick up. How do you deal with subjects like equal representation, diversity, gender equality, mental wellness in your respective networks? And I will add to it, in your respective workplaces. Is there a conscious effort to balance this? If yes, can you share how you have been able to achieve this, and maybe help us understand what the best practices that one needs to adopt to be able to manage this? The question is for all the panelists.
May I go first?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to talk about two instances. One is that I've been working with the Lynettes for, I would say, close to 2 decades now. And I think as an agency, it's been very, very focused on diversity initiatives, on ensuring that there's a lot of opportunity for anyone, and diversity does not just mean men and women. So it's been very focused on the LGBTQI community. It has been doing a lot of initiatives in that area, whether it's demystifying, or whether it's just having conversations around the different kinds of inclusivity measures that you can take. How can you actually have conversations which are comfortable? So simple initiatives leading to I would say actions which are very, very inclusive in nature. So as an organization, it's been really focused on that. When I come to WICCI, WICCI is really a body that's working in the area of ensuring more women rise through their careers, as well as reach the highest levels of leadership. And are a part of WICCI, along with some very, very senior communication leaders across the industry. I think one of the things that we are all very, very clear about is that we celebrate the differences and the uniqueness that men and women bring to the table. So it's not about one or the other, and that's how you really kind of ensure equal representation health. But I think this area is go forward because it's good for business, it's good for the economy, and I think done across the world, and I think there's a lot of emphasis on it. We are seeing the results, whether you look at any of the countries which have had women leaders and have managed COVID so much better, or whether it is right now the US elections. Lynette will tell us more about it, where we've seen a very, very strong representation of women. Now all this is not just to appease uh, the female gender. It's all about really seeing the value of having both men and women in leadership. And I think it's from that perspective that I think the world is moving, the economy is moving, our country is moving, and luckily corporations are also making an effort to go in that direction. So,
Absolutely. Lynette, do you want to add to that?
Well, I will give a slight nod to Kavita's reference to our elections. I will tell you on Inauguration Day a couple weeks ago, I was watching from my desk and I was so consumed with emotion to see a woman sworn in as vice president. I cried. I mean, I just sat at my desk and cried. And to realize that there will be young girls in this country that don't know any different, that they think that's how it's always been. It was a really special, it was really, really poignant. I think for PR boutiques, one of the things, so I am the president this year and Taranjeet is the vice president. And I think one of the things that our reign, if you will, has tried to address is better diversity within our organization. It was founded by agencies in the United States and has continued to grow. I think PRPOI is going to be 15 next year. So we're not an old network, we're fairly new. It has continued to grow from outside of the United States, and that has to be our focus. And that has to be very purposeful within the network. So I think having Taranjeet and I as president and vice president has really helped that. And we are taking small steps, but they're critically important. We were not great about scheduling our meetings where people across the globe could attend. We need to make sure if we're doing a panel discussion that we have members from all of the different regions. Do we have APAC members? Do we have European members? Do we have members from the Americas? So we're taking small steps. I think we have probably over the next 5 years of our network, that's the area where we will grow the most and where we need to grow the most. But it is recognized, and I think we're doing better.
Awesome. Bianca, I'm going to change the question slightly for you. Since you have been a part of a lot of diversity panels and advisory boards, what are the best practices, 3 best practices that any organization or network can adopt to be able to manage this, within their networks?
I would say I would start with normalizing differences, because this is culture, for example, it's not a plug and play sort of a solution. Culture is something that you can't deploy. It changes over time. So for any network or brand or a company, I think you start by changing the mindset in the company, and that is by normalizing differences, irrespective of how you look, the color of your skin, who you love. It is important to be able to celebrate differences, or at least accept them, and not make that the key deciding factor in critical decisions. Ensuring that everybody feels that they're welcomed in the company, that is not just a business decision. It is the right thing to do. It is just the human thing to do, right? And that's how I approach it. It is not about empowerment. It is about opportunity parity, really. Everybody should have the right opportunities. And for me as an individual, true equality really starts with equal pay. And it's 2021 and we're still having that debate about equal pay, right? So the first thing is normalize differences. normalize and tackle unconscious bias. The second is please pay right. You cannot talk about equality and opportunity parity and still be paying certain sections of your employees less, whether they're women, whether they're people from different communities, whether there are people who have a different identity and don't conform to the gender normal identities that we're all used to, that we've grown up with, because that is not the future. So that's I would say the second thing. And really acknowledging the changing face of leadership. So in all the panels that I speak at, or even at Wipro, because we have 185,000 people in 61 countries, if I'm not wrong, we have 35% women, and every time I tell them, and I have to sometimes fight with our leadership to say that I'm not going to host this if this is going to be a conversation for women, to women, by women, because many people coming together can affect change. This is a conversation that men need to be a part of. Because to the point that Lynette was making a little while ago, right? I think both in business as well as politics, leaders of the world have had to go through this real life challenge in the last 11 months, right? Real life leadership test, because they've had to learn how to lock down, how to unlock their businesses, while tackling the health of their employees as well that of their business. And I think during this time, there has been a handful of women leaders who've emerged as a benchmark for what competent leadership could look like. So I think this is that moment in history when we need to be open to replacing those old, obsolete leadership archetypes and adopt a more balanced perception of leadership. And as organizations, we have to be open to that, and we have to encourage and enable that. Just my 2 cents. Thank you. Sorry, I get really passionate when I talk about this.
That was brilliant, Bianca.
No, absolutely. I wish we could, we had more time to keep continuing this conversation, because I'm thoroughly enjoying myself, and with all the insights and learnings that all of you are sharing, it's absolutely wonderful. But I'm going to ask you three quick questions, and if you could give me one quick answer for each one of them, that will be lovely. So we'll go, through Lynette, Kavita, and Bianca. That's the cycle we'll follow, right? The first question. Let's make it a rapid fire round. Yeah. One trend that you have seen in the comms industry in your area, and going digital and 360-degree marketing comms is not an option to answer. Yeah.
I think the trend that I'm seeing now is true diversity.
Awesome. Kavita?
Collaboration, and collaboration.
Adoption of technology to address common challenges.
Awesome. One specific plan that has been laid out, for your respective networks in 2021.
For PRBI, we are really working hard to engage all of our members, making sure that they're participating in a meaningful way, and whatever that might mean to them individually.
I think the most important thing that we're going to do at WICCI in 2021 is roll out a massive mentoring program. So it's not going to be only about inspiration and networking, but it's going to be about really making a tangible difference in the lives of a few aspiring women leaders, and helping them actually guide them to reach the top.
Okay, 2.5 months into launching APACD in India, I would say the first thing that we are going to do or ask you to do is come talk to us. Look up Arpana Kumar Ahuja from Shell. She and I head the chapter in India, and you have my coordinates. We're very active on social media. You can reach out. Tell us what you need. Tell us, what is it that you're looking for from the network, and talk to us about the charter that we have, what we want to do, and we'll find that common point that works for everybody, right? And even if you don't join the community, it'll just be, a good chat that you have with two women, fun-loving women who possibly have a view on something, that might help you, and we'll learn from you. So good both ways.
Awesome. Last question. How does one join your network?
To join PRBI, you go to our website, which is prboutiques.com. And there's an application on there that you fill out and tell us more about your agency. And it is reviewed by the members and voted upon. And then, poof, you're a member.
So the interesting thing about WICCI is that you don't need to really join in WICCI. You just need to join in the conversation that that we commence, or any of the initiatives. We aren't really going to be charging any kind of a membership fee. There's going to be access to a lot of, I would say, knowledgeable leaders, knowledgeable conversations, and I would say fun conversations. So no membership fee is required. You just have to follow us on our LinkedIn page, on our social handles on Twitter, as well as Facebook, and I think you're set.
APACD.com. That's the website. Go look it up and just reach out to me or Arpana, and we'll take it from there. You're on mute.
Just thank you so much. I'm sure the audiences today have learned a lot about finding a network, identifying, with what kind of networks they need to join, and maybe how do they need to view it to be able to map it with their own careers and look for a global network to join. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking out the time today to speak to us.
But especially Lynette, it's 2:30 in the morning. It's incredible. Lynette, it was
I'm
so
going back to bed now.
I'll be in touch with all of you. Lovely joining this session with all of you. Thank you.
Marvelous meeting you both, and Taranjeet, thank you for asking me.
Thank you, ladies. Has been wonderful, wonderful chat.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
I'm going to take a minute to speak.
Sorry, I'm still here.
No, absolutely. Right. If during the next couple of weeks, if we still have a lot of questions that we have not really been able to address, we are already overshot the time by 10-15 minutes. If you can take the time out, in the next couple of weeks to be able to answer some of the questions that have been put out there, would be wonderful. It'll help. I think there are a lot of questions individually for PRBI, WICCI, and APACD. It'll be wonderful to have you guys, comment on them.
Yeah, happy to do so.
Awesome. All right. Bye.
In here. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Awesome. So that was Lynette, Kavita, and Bianca talking to us about global networks and how you can get started on it. Thank you for staying with us for the additional 15 minutes that we took to complete the conversation. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did. If you have any more questions, like I said, put them in the comment section below, tagging the panelists, and they will answer when they can. Let's continue to keep the conversation alive on this group, guys, because we can only learn more if we debate it out. By the way, all our episodes are now simulcasted onto YouTube, so you can watch it there as well. And you will also hear more from our panelists on our blog, more insights on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. So you can choose to address your questions on either one of the platforms. Happy to continue the conversation. Thank you for joining us today. Before we wind up, I will take a moment to say thank you to my co-founders, Sonali and Pooja, for driving this forward with me, and our industry partner, PRBI, media partner, Ads and Media Insider India, for supporting us today. Do join us for another intriguing session on Facebook and YouTube next Saturday. See you then.